chill. Episode 7 of Alien Earth. Let's talk about it. Hey, great to have you here. So as mentioned, today we'll be discussing the 7th episode of Alien Earth. And as a quick reminder, if you enjoy hanging out and talking Alien, please consider subscribing to the channel for more future content. So this episode was a bit of a shorter one, but it still had plenty of things take place. So we kick things off pretty much right where last episode ended. Slightly has Arthur's facehugger wrapped body underneath his bed, although I am wondering how he got Arthur all the way back from that giant air vent from the lab back to his room without anybody noticing all on his own, but they pretty much just chose to skip over that step. He's acting super naive here as to what's happening with Arthur. He's like giving Arthur water to drink as he's like moving the facehugger to the side until Smee shows up, and Smee's making a ton of noise at the front door, so Slightly has to let him in here, and when he does, Smee kind of freaks out when he sees Arthur, but he eventually does wind up agreeing to help Slightly. I did wonder a little bit in this scene, why isn't Morrow talking to Slightly when Smee's there with him? I'm guessing it's because Morrow's distracted and busy moving forward with the whole Yutani attack. We then cut back over to the lab where Kirsh, Kavalier, and other crew members are attending to the aftermath of the lab. And for once we have humans going first here, since the only loose threat is that fly that attacked Toodles. Kirsh then shows Kavalier the footage of the sheep distracting Toodles, which super intrigues Kavalier by how smart this eyeball creature could be. Wendy then barges into the lab and freaks out when she realizes that they aren't actually safe here at Prodigy anymore. And in this scene, we also have Kavalier realize that the trackers for the hybrid kids have been shut off at this point. Kavalier says to get to the hybrids before Wendy does, but nobody seems to go to the hybrids. I'm guessing Kirsh was supposed to be the one to do so maybe that's why. I did find it kind of strange that Ains doesn't show up until later on in the episode. And when Wendy gets back to her room, Joe then shows up, tells her they need to go, and based on the last scene with her, she may finally actually be willing to do so. She wants to save everybody first though, so they go to Nibs and Curly. Curly's kind of blaming Wendy here for everything going wrong and insists on staying, but Nibs is like, alright, actually I'm good, I'll join the two of you. But before leaving though, Wendy hacks into the computer system and lets the xenomorph out. It's kind of strange here that Wendy's so worried about saving everyone, but she's here letting the xenomorph out to kill people, and us as the audience is starting to realize she's no longer Team Human, and instead is defending the aliens and the hybrids. I will say though, it is still pretty weird when she speaks the xenomorph language. We then get a brief scene where Kavalier confronts Dame Sylvia about Arthur having turned off the trackers, but she's surprisingly telling the truth here about not knowing anything. And I feel like overall, her character has kind of been meh these last few episodes. We do then get a funny scene where Slightly and Smee are trying to smuggle out facehugger Arthur until Kirsh runs into them, but instead of stopping them, he's like, hey, actually use this elevator to get out. So definitely a little bit more of the anarchy side of Kirsh here. And now over with Joe and Wendy and Nibs, they stumble across their child grave sites outside, and Nibs is pretty distraught, but Wendy's largely indifferent. On one hand, you have Nibs, who's acknowledging that the child version of her was truly her, but Wendy's like, that's not us, we're still here, further validating that she's kind of abandoning her human origins. It is pretty strange though, that Wendy left the Prodigy buildings without Smee and Slightly. She wanted to save everyone, but the everyone that they went to get were just Nibs and I guess the xenomorph. And then back with Smee and Slightly, we get another pretty funny moment here where they're now outside with Arthur's body. They have to briefly set him down to hide from these guards, but when the guards are done passing, they can't find where they put Arthur. And sure enough, Arthur has awoken and is feeling a little bit off. They tell him that Dame is at the beach and they need to go there, but if you're an Alien fan, you know the clock is ticking on Arthur's chest. And then down at the beach, Arthur eventually comes to his senses and knows that the two of them are lying. He's like, hey, let's go back, talk things over, it's gonna be okay. And then sure enough, he keels over and we get the baby xenomorph bursting through his chest and running off into the forest. And Smee is freaking out here since he knows he's been lied to by Slightly. Arthur is dead at this point, but they still choose to continue to drag his body along the beach. And then back inside Prodigy, we get a brief moment of vulnerability with Curly as she goes to sit with Dame Sylvia as if she's her mom, there to comfort her. And then back with Smee and Slightly, they're walking through these swampy waters with Arthur on this wooden raft. And I'm definitely wondering here, where did Smee and Slightly get this raft? No idea. And suddenly we have Yutani troops popping out of the water like SEAL Team 6 storming the beach. And we have Morrow with him, but he's bummed to find out that the alien in Arthur is now missing, so he moves forward to infiltrate Prodigy, bringing along both Smee and Slightly. Then back in the lab, we do finally have Ains here talking to Boy Kavalier, As they're testing the intelligence of this sheep, Kavalier asks the sheep to recite the numbers to pi after 3.14, and sure enough it does it by stomping, but feels a little bit demeaned by Kavalier. And it is pretty fitting that from the beginning, Kavalier wanted to talk to someone who is as intelligent as him, and well, it turns out, it's the eye. So we have Kavalier and Ains talk about putting the eye in a human so that they can communicate with it. They discuss maybe picking a low IQ person to really test the abilities of the eye, but Kavalier seems that he pretty intently has somebody in mind here. Who do you think this may be? In the moment, I was like, maybe Ains? He's looking a little weird towards him, or himself? But given some time to think about it, I'm thinking it could be Joe. And now back with Wendy. Her trio gets stopped by this group of soldiers, and then we get a very Predator type of scene as Wendy calls out for the xenomorph, and it jumps down from the trees and just demolishes these soldiers. It does leave Joe alone though, so maybe that explains some of his plot armor. Wendy seems to have tamed this thing pretty well. It's super reminiscent of how the Jurassic World movies had Chris Pratt train Blue the Raptor. And we have Joe, who seems a little bit unsure how to respond to Wendy connecting with this creature. We then cut over to Morrow and the Yutani soldiers, which very easily get overthrown by Kirsh and the Prodigy soldiers. So it does seem like Prodigy has a lot of manpower. It just has been weirdly absent for some of this season. Morrow tells Kirsh this isn't over, to which Kirsh responds with saying, "Nothing ever is," and Kirsh then grounds Smean slightly. So I can't tell if Kirsh is putting on a facade here or what he's really doing, but in this scene, he's definitely Team Prodigy still. We then have our final showdown of the episode with Joe, Wendy, and Nibs reaching the boat at the docks. I know they were briefly confronted earlier, but no one seems to really be stepping in to stop them until this moment. Now on the boat, Joe's soldier friends from earlier this season then pop out, and they all get surrounded with soldiers on the docks as well. We have Nibs freak out here and rips the jaw off of one of the soldiers, which is pretty gnarly, and nobody from the dock responds by remotely considering shooting at her for some reason. And instead, they're just fine with Wendy and Nibs beating up the people on this boat. And Wendy's about to call for the alien again, but Joe reaches over and covers her mouth to stop her. And we have Nibs, who's about to do another Mortal Kombat fatality to one of Joe's friends until he grabs a gun and shoots her, presumably killing her here. Maybe she'll be in the next episode, we'll have to see, but they set up a lot with her character this season, like the comments about being pregnant, so it'd be kind of strange just to abandon all of that. And I will say, I did like Joe here a lot more in this episode. He stopped being so one-dimensional and clearly had this internal struggle between wanting to protect both humans as this medic and his sister. He definitely spent most of this episode conflicted about being on Team Alien instead of Team Human, and finally making a stand here. We then fade to black with the soldiers on the dock still just standing there, the xenomorph still hiding in the trees, and Wendy just yelling at Joe, "What did you do?" And her band of choice for the credits in this one wound up being Queens of the Stone Age, some more of that hard rock or alt metal to end this episode. Let me know down in the comments below what your prediction is for the band used in the final episode. And now looking at an overall score here for this episode, on a scale of negative, neutral, or positive, episode 7, I'm going to go with a neutral rating, but I would say that it's a pretty high neutral. I like the characters a lot more in this episode than the last one. They didn't make as irrational of choices, and we finally got some more xenomorph carnage here, while still building up towards a finale next week. I'm still a bit surprised we haven't seen that Plumbicare, that Venus flytrap-like creature, take anybody out, and I'll be a bit disappointed if we don't have it go for somebody like Kavalier in episode 8, maybe even have the sheep like kick Kavalier towards it. There were some moments early on during the chaos where I felt a little bit bad for Kavalier, but then he would speak and he would remind me how awful he was. But let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. What parts did you like or dislike? And what are you hoping for in the finale? Do you have any predictions on who may live or die?
Live or die, make your choice.
I would say Kavalier is a pretty sure thing to get killed, but I'm not positive on the others. Maybe another hybrid? For how indestructible these things were being pitched as, Toodles and Nibs went down pretty seamlessly. But let me know your thoughts on all things Alien Earth down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.